G'day, and thanks for pressing play today. I'm Hayley, photographic artist and creative photography addict, and in this video, we'll be taking a behind the curtain look at how I created my artwork, Dear Dear. So, Dear Dear was created purely because I had been collecting these fake flowers for years, and I had seen pictures around of like those flower walls that people use as backgrounds, and I really loved them, but I just knew that I had no way of creating my own flower wall and certainly no way to store it had I created one. So that's how it came about, but as always, I've then, put it in exhibitions and had to come up with some meaning for it. So digging deep, I tried to figure out what the meaning for this image is, and this is what I came up with. So I include a quote from John Ruskin, and it says, "No human face is exactly the same in its lines on each side. No leaf perfect in its lobes. No branch in its symmetry. All admit irregularity as they imply change. And to banish imperfection is to destroy expression, to check exertion, to paralyze vitality." And then I go on to say, "It is said that the most beautiful faces are the most symmetrical." So I mirrored everything in this image except for her face to draw attention to its imperfections and show that it is more often our flaws that make us beautiful, interesting, and unique. So that is my little description. It's not entirely true. I did not fully mirror my face in this, and we'll talk about that later. But first of all, let me show you how I shot it. So basically, I had these flowers I'd been collecting for years, usually if I found them cheaply at an op shop or at a craft store. And so I put down a sheet on the ground and I put it near a big window because I knew I wanted to use natural light for this. And as I started to arrange them, I realized that I did not have near enough that I was going to need. And that's how this entire mirroring idea came about. So what I did is arrange what I could into one section on the left and then in Photoshop mirrored it on the right. This still did not give me enough flowers to use, however. And so as we start working through the Photoshop document, you'll see where they came from. The other thing I had to do, being a self-portrait, it was really tricky. It's always really hard to photograph yourself, especially when you're lying in some flowers. And so I had to use a tripod that has a boom arm that came out and bent over me so the feet weren't in view from my tripod. My tripod doesn't do this. I had to borrow someone else's tripod. And the other issue I had, which again we'll see later on, is that I only had one antler. So again, this mirroring issue really helped with that. So let's go through the file. Now, I do have a new computer. The colors are a bit weird, so if this looks all a little bit weird on video, that is why. I just haven't kind of sorted out how to fix the color issue with it yet. But basically in Photoshop, I took the main kind of arrangement that I photographed with the flowers all lying out. With this first layer, I was very, very careful to kind of cut everything out and paint around edges. I think later on, as I sort of started working and filling in these gaps, I realized that wasn't entirely necessary. So you can see I have gone to some effort to paint around everything, make selections. But as we progress, you'll see I get a little bit lazier with that. Then I took that and rotated it. I'm not sure why because, and you can see I did not carefully cut around this one. I think this layer will probably become irrelevant later on because I will finish this side and then mirror it to the other side. So we'll just ignore that for now. But I've just put in this layer here, and as you can see, it's very roughly kind of painted in because I knew there would be things going over top of it. So I've just used that to fill in some of the sections on the left there. I've made some more to fill in the bottom, and what I usually did with this was take some flowers and put them into different piles so I could photograph them looking differently. Or I took the main section and rotated bits of it around so it looked different, and then I've added other things over top just to make that arrangement look different. So, there weren't issues where there were clones of things. And I've sort of popped in my main girl. So this is what the main pose looked like. And then what I have done is I was wearing a wig that I bought on eBay. So it's a blonde wig and at the bottom it has purple and pink curls. So it's very kind of fantasy-like. And the dress is actually one of my mum's old formal dresses. So I really loved the way that her curls were sitting on this side as opposed to this side. So I just mirrored that, made a copy, flipped it, and then put it into position to go along with the symmetrical theme. Next, I have mirrored her bodice. I didn't really like how it was sitting, so I took one side and copied it over to the other side. So now that whole section is kind of a mirror. Then I was still back working on my flowers. I didn't like that little black spot at the top, so I popped some more in there. I've added a whole different corner there because there is a lot of darkness at the top there. Given her a new arm, and I think this was actually probably her original arm, but I had layered flowers over top of her as I was working in Photoshop, so I had to give her her arm back. So I would have very carefully selected that out from the original image and then popped it over top of those flowers. I've done a little bit of toning to it and then just made a copy of it to pop it on the other side. And obviously some of those curls came across too. And that is good because I often forget to take my watch off, or I've got, hairbands on, so that fixed that problem. Mirroring is great for lots of reasons. Then I started adding in shadows because I knew I would have a flower on her arm, so I've just done some shadow work there and then popped in that layer, which is actually some flowers, just filling in these gaps here, and mirrored that. Then I put even more at the top just to fill in some of that space because I knew I needed basically this whole box filled, so I still had some work to do at the top. Again, just putting in some shadows later for a flower that's about to pop in, so pop that one there. It's basically a copy of this one that I put in her hands just to make it look like she was holding something. Filling in that top a little bit more, adding in shadows to make sense when other flowers went in. And now I'm just kind of individually filling in tiny gaps that were annoying me until that section was kind of making me happy. So I'm just adding in more shadows, more little flowers. And then boom, I made a copy of it, flipped it. So now we've got our symmetry. At this stage, I would have, how have I done that? I actually copied her body. So all that work I did before, I just copied it anyway and mirrored it. Now, what I have done though is, that is what her face looked when I mirrored. So, really pretty. So I had to actually mask her face out of that and give her back her original face. And that's kind of where my thinking came from that description. Now I'm kind of doing some light work, so I'm basically lighting up areas that I felt were too dark, just to kind of give some more symmetry to it all. Now I was working on her little hand flower, just, I think, pulling it out a little bit to make it look bigger. So at this point I was feeling a little bit self-conscious, despite that description before, so I have done some retouching to my face. I took out the eye bags and lightened up her hairline just a little bit. So just controlling the lighting a little bit with that one. Then I did some retouching to her arm. I'm not even really sure what I did there. Did some tiny fixes to her hair that once applied to the left had to be applied to the right for the symmetry. And I've just lightened her face up a little bit with the curves, done some toning, and really all that's doing is making the kind of bringing in some light from the top here. Now I did shoot this with a window, a big window right here. You would have seen it in the original image, but the curtains were closed. So the light was really, really beautiful, and this is pretty much straight out of camera. There wasn't a lot of toning done yet, so that's window light, it's just so beautiful at any time. Kind of had a matte look to everything. Now, again, I was feeling a little bit self-conscious. I felt this side of her nose was too far extended. I say her, I mean me. So I just kind of used Liquify to push that nose in to make it a little bit of a nicer shape. I've done a little bit of work to my lips and brightened my eye, particularly on the right a little bit. I think the light was hitting it a bit weird, so I've just cleaned that up. And I've popped in my first antler. So I got these at a flea market. They only had the one, and I added it really for purely no other reason than I wanted to make this a fantasy image, and I just thought a girl lying in flowers wasn't kind of fantasy enough. It didn't tell enough of a story for me, so that's why I added the antlers in. I love deer. They're kind of my spirit animal anyway, so it made total sense. Then I've just brightened that antler up a little bit so it's sort of stuck out from the flowers, and then obviously duplicated it, put it on the other side, and lightened it up too. Added in a vignette to really draw the eye to the center where she is. I've given it some warmer toning just to make it a little bit prettier. Darkened down her arms because I thought they were kind of dragging the eye a little bit too much. Now I took this eye on the right and made it bigger. I don't know why. Something about it must have been bothering me, but I think what I did is just made a copy of it, flipped it, and then popped it over this one. So it is now the same eye, but flipped. I've given it some toning, so I've made it browner and then a little bit greener. Then I've sharpened the image, which also brought in some other little tiny fixes I'd missed. There was a tag here and her hair was sitting a bit funny here, so I fixed those up. Added a levels just to brighten everything, add a bit more contrast, some more vibrance. A curves that's darkening that vignette even more. Now I'm just doing tiny, tiny fixes. So that's hair on the right antler. Oh yes, something was weird there.
A bit more retouching. I felt that her lips weren't as symmetrical as I would have liked, so I pulled one side in, as you can see. And that gives her kind of a more innocent look as well. Finally, some curves just to darken down everything at the base here, because I figured she would be casting a shadow if she was lying there. And then finally, I changed this flower from orange to purple because I figured they looked too similar. So I wanted to make it look different. And so this is how this image was created. Now, I really love this image. I mean, had it been a prettier girl, I think it would be a better image. But I did actually think of, offering this as a service to other people, where I could make these beautiful flower wall beauty portraits. But the problem is I just get too bored too easily, so I couldn't imagine doing that for the rest of my life. But yeah, it really wasn't too hard. I mean, it was just a little bit of masking with the flowers, which I kind of like to do sometimes. I find it quite therapeutic. And really, it came together far more beautifully than I ever could have imagined. So amazing what you can create with just a bag of flowers.
That's it, my dear. The cheapskate's way to create a lush floral scene. If you enjoy this style of art and would love to try creating some of your own, then come join me in my Storytelling Composites course, where we'll walk through every step of the photography and Photoshop process. Otherwise, join me again soon for another dose of inspiration. Happy creating!